Imagine you're a method actor
Oh,
and you've just been cast in the role of a lifetime. The money is great, the prestige is unmatched, but there is this one bizarre, ironclad clause in your contract.
let me guess, you can't break character.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You are never allowed to take the costume off. I mean, you have
Yeah.
to stay completely in character while you're like browsing the cereal aisle at the grocery store. You have to maintain your fake accent while talking to your own family.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. You even have to stay in character while you are brushing your teeth and trying to fall asleep.
That sounds
It
exhausting.
really is.
Yeah.
Because you're constantly monitoring every single movement, right?
Right.
You're actively recalling your character's complex backstory and anxiously reviewing what you said to someone yesterday just so you don't accidentally break continuity today.
Just trying to genuinely feel the sheer bone-deep exhaustion of maintaining that performance for decades. It would be a total nightmare.
Right.
The sheer amount of cognitive processing power required just to uphold the illusion of that character, I mean, it would consume nearly all of your bandwidth.
Absolutely.
You'd be left with almost nothing for actual, spontaneous lived experience. Every moment would be heavily mediated by the script.
And today, we are exploring a really profound proposition from our sources for this deep dive. The idea is that this exhausting, never-ending, heavily scripted performance, that's exactly what you are doing every single day of your life.
We're talking about the architecture of our own inner narrator.
Yes. We're looking at a deeply compelling philosophical framework built around this fascinating paradox. It suggests two things. First, that losing your quote-unquote identity is actually the exact mechanism for finding balanced freedom. And second, that achieving a state of no mind is really the only way to genuinely open your heart. Okay, let's unpack this because those are some heavy claims.
They are. And those phrases, losing your identity, achieving no mind, they can trigger immediate resistance.
Oh, for sure.
If you're accustomed to Western individualistic thinking, the idea of losing your identity sounds synonymous with losing your sanity, or at least like losing your edge.
Yeah, it sounds like you're giving up.
Right. But we aren't talking about some catastrophic psychological collapse here, or, a dramatic mystical ego death. We are discussing something entirely practical.
Practical in what way?
Well, we're looking at the radical falling away of the inner voice that constantly comments on your life as you are living it. It's the silencing of that apparatus that is always comparing, rehearsing, and scripting.
Right, because we usually think of our identity as our fundamental self,
Mhm.
like the core of who we are. But the framework we are exploring today draws a hard line between the two.
It does.
It posits that your identity isn't you.
Yeah.
It is just an ongoing, exhausting editorial project.
Mhm.
You experience reality, and almost instantly, there's this narrator jumping in to categorize it. Like, I like this. I hate that. Oh, this reminds me of my failure last week. How does this impact my personal brand?
Precisely. We conflate the narrator with the actual awareness. Ordinary human cognition has this incredibly heavy, sticky texture to it.
Sticky is a great word for it.
Yeah, because you don't merely process sensory input or interpersonal dynamics, you filter it all through a rigid conceptual framework of me. You are constantly managing impressions to protect your narrative coherence, exactly like that method actor terrified of breaking character.
Okay, I have to jump in here because if I'm listening to this, a very obvious alarm bell is ringing in my head right now.
Let's hear it.
If I just stop narrating my life,
Right.
if I switch off the internal monologue that is assessing and evaluating everything, aren't I essentially giving myself a cognitive lobotomy? Like, does no mind just mean I am zoned out and wandering around oblivious to my surroundings?
That is the most common and honestly instinctual fear. If you put down the script, you fear you'll forget how to act.
Exactly.
But the reality is the exact opposite. Contemplative traditions have studied this state for millennia. In Zen, it's referred to as mushin. In yogic philosophy, you see parallels in the concept of anahata, and in Buddhist thought, shunyata.
And what do those actually mean in practice?
Well, mushin literally translates to mind without mind, or a mind not fixed on any single emotion or thought. It is absolutely not a state of stupidity or incapacity.
Okay.
It's actually a highly optimized condition of cognition that has simply stopped watching itself.
So it's knowing without the knower constantly demanding a slice of the pie.
Exactly. When you remove the self-reflective loop, the part of the brain that steps outside the experience to evaluate how the experience is going, you are left with a functionally superior state of operation.
I want to break down the mechanics of why it is functionally superior, because this makes so much sense when you look at high-level performance. Take an archer, for example.
That's a great example.
Right, if an archer is at full draw, and they actually think the thought, now is the perfect time to release the arrow, that conscious thought introduces a measurable delay.
Yes, the prefrontal cortex interferes.
Exactly. The narrating, evaluating part of the brain interferes with the motor cortex. They've added a layer of cognitive friction. The archer who operates in motion doesn't decide to shoot. The shot simply happens when the conditions are perfect.
You see the exact same mechanism in musicians. A musician who monitors their own playing while they are playing it, well, they split their cognitive load.
And the music suffers.
The music immediately deadens. It loses its vitality because the brain's processing power is divided between executing the complex action and internally critiquing the action.
That makes total sense.
But perhaps the most relatable example is simply having a conversation. Think about how often you listen to someone speak, but instead of actually absorbing their words, you are simultaneously composing your brilliant rebuttal in your head.
Oh man, we all do it. You're just waiting for them to stop making noises so you can deliver the monologue you've been rehearsing for the last 20 seconds.
And in doing so, you haven't truly heard them. You are interacting with your own self-talk, not with the human being sitting in front of you. When that habit of self-monitoring dissolves, your natural resting state becomes available. Without the drag of the narrator, your processing is faster, it's more accurate, and it's far more adaptable to what is actually happening in the room.
Okay, that cognitive friction makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
But let's shift from the brain to the emotional impact. If quieting the inner narrator makes us more efficient processors of reality, what does it actually do to our emotional state?
This brings us to the second half of the paradox.
Right, the idea that no mind equals an opened heart.
Yes, and this is where the framework fundamentally challenges modern self-help culture. We are constantly told that we need to, quote, do the work to open our hearts.
Like it's a full-time job.
Exactly. It's framed as an act of achievement. We're told we need to manufacture vulnerability or bravely force ourselves to be empathetic. It's treated as this heroic effort. But the idea here is that an open heart is a consequence, not a cause.
It's a byproduct.
It is a natural byproduct, not a project.
There's a brilliant analogy used to explain this in the texts. Imagine trying to force water out of a faucet while your other hand is aggressively jammed over the spout, blocking it.
Right.
All of this self-help advice is basically telling you to pump the handle harder, to generate more water. But the water, the empathy, the receptivity, the natural human connection, it's already there. It is a perpetual underground spring.
You don't have to create it.
No. You just have to take your damn hand off the faucet.
And we have to identify what that hand actually is. What's fascinating here is that the blockage is not an absence of love or a lack of emotional capacity.
And what is it?
The hand blocking the faucet is the ceaseless noise of self-management. It is that identity maintenance script turning every single interaction into a threat assessment.
Like, does this person respect me?
Right. Or am I compromising my boundaries? If I show them compassion, will they think I'm weak?
But I'm going to play devil's advocate again here.
Go for it.
If I take my hand off the faucet if I just let the water flow unimpeded without assessing the situation, doesn't that lack of self-management make me incredibly vulnerable? I mean, if I drop the narrator, don't I just become a doormat for toxic people?
It's a very valid concern, but it stems from a total misunderstanding of what the narrator actually does. Your inner narrator isn't a highly accurate threat detection system. It's a highly biased storyteller.
Oh, that's interesting.
It often keeps you in toxic situations because it tells you stories like, I can fix them, or I deserve this, or if I leave, it means I failed.
Wow, yeah.
When you drop the narrator, you don't lose your boundaries. In fact, you see reality much more clearly. You see a person's actual behavior without the distortion of your own hopes, fears, and ego investments.
You're just seeing what's actually there.
Exactly. You don't become a doormat. You simply respond to the reality of the situation with clarity. Genuine intimacy and connection don't require you to work up the courage to be vulnerable. They just require the self-protection apparatus to quiet down.
Okay, so if the goal is to stop pumping the handle and just remove our hand to quiet that self-management apparatus, how do we practically do that? I mean, we can't just think our way out of thinking.
No, you can't.
And this brings us to a really fascinating evolutionary perspective. Where can we actually see this state of being modeled in the real world? Because we have to look outside the human sphere entirely, right? We have to look at nature.
There is a very specific mechanistic reason why contemplative traditions retreat to forests or mountains. It isn't just for the aesthetic beauty or the fresh air.
But
It's because the natural world is a lived, scaling demonstration of no mind. Nature operates with immense complexity, but it does so entirely without an inner narrator.
it's the ultimate example of doing without overthinking. Like a river doesn't pause at a bend to evaluate its flowing technique.
Exactly.
A tree doesn't suffer from imposter syndrome if its seasonal growth isn't as robust as the oak tree next to it. The root of a plant finds water simply by navigating the moisture gradient in the soil. It doesn't sit there and debate the optimal strategy for finding a drink.
Consider the systems biology of a hawk in a dive.
Oh, this is a great one.
The hawk doesn't sit on a branch, consciously calculate the wind speed, internally review its aerodynamic posture, and then issue a top-down executive command to its wings to fold.
That would take way too long.
Top-down cognitive control is far too slow for that kind of precision. Instead, the hawk is relying on bottom-up sensory processing. Millions of sensory inputs are being translated directly into micro-adjustments within milliseconds.
So it's pure reaction.
The hawk doesn't plan the dive. It is the dive. Nature operates with perfect information flow, completely unmediated by a conceptual self.
Which explains so much about why human beings pay, like, thousands of dollars to go on silent retreats in the woods. When you spend time in a dense forest or sitting by an ocean, you feel this immense psychological relief. Why? Because the environment absolutely refuses to engage with your self-talk.
It doesn't care.
Right. The trees do not care what you do for a living. The ocean isn't impressed by your social media presence.
Exactly. Human society is a giant feedback loop for the ego. We constantly validate and challenge each other's identities. Even deliberate meditation practices can sometimes backfire because there is still a meditator present.
An identity trying very hard to achieve enlightenment.
Right, silently evaluating whether they are breathing correctly. But nature simply presents pure, unmediated events. It starves the inner narrator of the social feedback it requires to survive.
And without that fuel, the habit of self-narration naturally begins to atrophy.
Precisely.
All right, so let's say the narrator starts to quiet down. We leave the forest, we come back to our human lives, but we try to operate without the filter. We try to engage with pure bottom-up processing. Won't the sheer volume of data in the modern world completely paralyze us?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, my narrator might be annoying, but it feels like it functions as a necessary spam filter for reality.
It feels like a spam filter, yes. We assume if we drop our identity, we will be flooded by what the text calls completely information, the raw, unfiltered totality of the moment.
Yeah, that sounds terrifying.
We think the identity shields us from being overwhelmed. But in our ordinary ego-driven state, we are constantly processing information instrumentally. We're desperately sorting every interaction into columns. Does this benefit me? Does it threaten me? Does it confirm my worldview?
Oh, I see.
That sorting process is what actually causes the overwhelm.
It's like the difference between swimming and floating. If you are constantly trying to swim against a strong river, current kicking, thrashing, trying to dictate exactly where you go, you are going to exhaust yourself in minutes. The river feels overwhelming.
Exactly.
And if you simply flip onto your back and float, the exact same volume of water is moving around you, but it requires zero effort. The river just carries you.
That is the perfect distinction. When you stop laboring to sort reality through the lens of self-interest, the knowing itself becomes effortless. It's a non-dual mode of cognition. And what is remarkable is that when you stabilize in this floating state, you don't experience chaos. You actually begin to perceive what are called holistic formations.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. To explain what a holistic formation is, think about a starling murmuration.
Yes.
If you've ever watched videos of thousands of birds flying together at dusk, making those massive, sweeping liquid shapes in the sky, it looks highly choreographed. But there is no CEO bird at the front shouting out coordinates, right? There is no central planner.
Exactly. It's a decentralized system. Biologists have found that each individual bird is simply paying attention to a handful of its immediate neighbors.
Just reacting.
They are following incredibly simple rules of alignment and cohesion without any conceptual filter. Out of that localized, immediate responsiveness, this breathtaking macro pattern emerges spontaneously.
So bringing that back to our own brains, it's like upgrading from dial-up internet to fiber optics.
That's a fun way to put it.
The narrator is dial-up. It has to manually handshake and verify every single packet of data, which bottlenecks the whole system. No mind is fiber optics. The data just flows. And this is exactly how human creativity works, isn't it? Have you ever stared at a complex problem at work, analytically attacking it for hours, trying to force a top-down solution, and you get absolutely nowhere?
We've all been there.
But the minute you step away, go for a walk, and abandon the analytical attack, the solution just arrives.
Yes. Or when artists describe the experience of a painting or a song coming through them, rather than being manufactured by them.
Like they're just a vessel.
They aren't talking about magic. They're describing the concrete experience of tapping into a holistic formation. By dropping the narrator, they allowed their brain's pattern recognition software to run unimpeded. Ideas that the conscious mind thought were entirely unrelated suddenly snapped together because the ego stopped insisting on being the origin point of the thought.
Okay, this all sounds incredibly expansive. Flow states, open hearts, holistic formations. But we have to crash back down to earth for a minute.
Back to reality.
We live in a society. I have rent to pay. I have to remember to pick my kids up from school at a very specific time. I can't just float into a bank and try to pay my mortgage with pure presence.
No, you cannot.
If I completely abandon my identity, how do I actually function as a human being? Am I just floating through life?
It is the ultimate pragmatic question. If you swing too far, you end up useless to society. This requires us to understand the final critical balance. We have to distinguish between two deeply flawed states of being, the soulless ego and the egoless soul.
Break those down for me.
A soulless ego describes a person whose entire existence is trapped in the surface narrative. They've lost all contact with any deeper, silent presence. Their self-story is brittle and rigid.
Because it's all they have.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because they have forgotten that their identity is just a constructed story, they defend it with lethal ferocity. If you criticize their political view, or their taste in music, or their job performance, they react as if you were trying to physically kill them. To them, the story is their life. There is no foundation beneath it.
Right, they mistake the costume for the actor. But the other extreme, the egoless soul, is just as dangerous, isn't it?
It is. The egoless soul is what happens when people use these spiritual concepts to bypass the reality of human existence. It is a state of dissociation.
Oh, wow.
If you completely destroy the ego, you lose the capacity to organize yourself over time. You cannot make a commitment to a partner and keep it. You cannot show up to a job. You end up using very high-minded spiritual language to mask the fact that you are simply avoiding the basic responsibilities of being a person.
So it's about finding the middle ground. The healthiest structure isn't about destroying the ego. It's about demoting it.
Demoting it, exactly.
If the soul, that deep, unnarrated presence, is the hard drive of a computer, the ego is just the graphical user interface. You need the UI, you need the little folders and the mouse cursor to actually click on things and navigate the digital world. But you don't confuse the little picture of a folder with the actual silicon and electricity running the machine.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. You absolutely need an ego to coordinate behavior, to navigate social complexity, and to plan for the future. But when your foundation is rooted in that deeper, silent presence, the ego becomes a functional, non-defended structure.
It's just doing its job.
Yes. It doesn't need to fight to the death over every slight. It does its job, and then it quiets down.
There is a classic, beautiful analogy for this. It's a relationship between the ocean and the waves. The deep, silent ground of your being is the vast ocean. Your ego, your daily identity, the roles you play, those are the waves crashing on the surface.
Right.
The ocean holds the waves, it generates them, it experiences them,
Yeah.
but it is never truly destabilized by them, no matter how chaotic a hurricane gets on the surface. If you drop down 50 feet, the water is perfectly still.
And that is what is meant by balanced freedom. It isn't a rigid, white-knuckled state where you are desperately trying to maintain inner peace. It is the fluid, adaptable responsiveness of water. You can participate in the drama of your life. You can hold your story, but you hold it loosely. Your fundamental okayness is no longer contingent on whether your specific surface narrative succeeds or fails on any given Tuesday.
So as we wrap up this exploration, let's distill this down for you listening. Losing your identity doesn't mean destroying yourself. It simply means releasing your identity from its desperate, exhausting grip on its own coherence.
You stop constantly editing the script.
Exactly. You aren't forcing your way toward some glowing state of enlightenment. It is far more mundane and beautiful than that. It's like taking a rag and wiping off a beautiful wooden table that has been buried under decades of junk mail and clutter.
Right.
You patiently, curiously remove the layers of narration, and you discover that a steady, perfectly functional surface was always waiting underneath.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the opened heart is just the natural state of a mind that has stopped building defensive walls. The balance is found the moment the story realizes it's just a story, and the depth remembers it's the depth.
I love that. And I want to leave you with a final thought, a practical experiment to test this out in your actual life today. The next time you find yourself in a completely ordinary, low-stakes situation, maybe you're standing in line waiting to order a coffee, or you're just walking across a parking lot to your car. Try this.
Highly recommend it.
For exactly 60 seconds. See if you can experience that walk or that brief transaction without narrating it to yourself. Don't review how your voice sounded when you said your order. Don't mentally plan the email you have to write when you get to the office.
Observe.
Just be the walking. Feel the concrete under your shoes. Just be the listening. Take your hand off the faucet just for a minute. What if the most profound psychological breakthrough isn't waiting for you at the end of a 10-day silent retreat on a mountaintop? What if it's hiding right there, in the tiny pocket of silence you create while waiting for a latte?
Remember, you don't have to play the character every single second of the day. You are allowed to put the script down.
You really are. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Wishing you a clear mind and an open heart until next time.